Necromunda hired gun is what happens when passion and great ideas collide with a lack of experience and budget like a train out of control. It's a crazy, fast-paced FPS with a lot of mobility and a lot of fun abilities to play with, but it's also an unpolished mess with a whole bunch of dubious mechanics. The premise is quite simple. You're a bounty hunter doing dirty work deep in the underhive of Necromunda, a gathering place for the scum of society. Makes me feel right at home. This takes place in the Warhammer 40k universe, more specifically in the titular Necromunda, which is some sort of weapons and munitions manufacturing world. But deep underground you have criminal gangs duking it out for scraps and rare ancient artifacts, and of course you end up getting involved in it. Look, I'm not a Warhammer nut. My knowledge of it is basically Dawn of War, Space Marine, and now Necromunda. But I can tell how much attention Strumon's studio paid to the little details, and by all accounts I've heard, both this and Deathwing were visual treats for the fans from an artistic standpoint. Not that it looks bad on the technological side, but it's not uncommon to see the already clunky and messy takedowns result in your character stabbing the air or something. Necromunda is jank, but it's good jank, and also the only good cyberpunk FPS in recent memory. It's not unpolished and clunky because the developers didn't care. It's unpolished and clunky because the developers did care, but simply didn't have the resources to pull it off with the shine that big games do. It's not a AAA game, but it's also not an indie game with peanut budget. It's on that less recognized but just as important middle market that follows the trendsetters, but also has the creative freedom to experiment, free from the shackles of the mainstream audience's whims. You've got a number of story missions to complete, as well as some randomly generated ones. While the story isn't terribly interesting, the missions are mostly fine from a gameplay perspective. The side missions, on the other hand, just throw you into one of the levels and then keep spawning enemies until you complete the objective, which can take either several minutes or several seconds. Besides the expected concept of shooting people in the face, you also gain credits to spend on various things, primarily improvements to your cybernetics. These abilities elevate the gameplay to another level, sometimes quite literally. You've got slow motion, you've got an aimbot, and what is slowly becoming one of my favorites is the strength booster, which makes you so fast that you can probably sequence break entire missions by accident. The big highlight is the grappling hook that you get early on, which quickly pulls you towards your target. Combined with the very open and very vertical level design, you have a game that lets you go around wherever you want. Instead of hitting you in the face with invisible walls or other blockades, the game gives you the tools and then lets you go to town with them, and it's awesome. And yes, the guns feel as great as they look. They're punchy, and they destroy enemies good. That's likely why I've been booting it up every other day, even though I already have all the upgrades and nothing interesting to spend all that money on. It's playing merely for the joy of shooting people in the face. But however you go about it, you slowly grow your collection of weapons and assorted dinkley-doos that grant you all kinds of bonuses that the game doesn't always explain very well. Juju. What does an archaeotech do exactly? Supposedly it adds elemental damage, but besides making a different effect on impact, I couldn't tell any difference. And how exactly do you trigger the takedowns? The only somewhat reliable way I've found is to hit enemies with the hook, but the only way to know is to get right in their face and check if the prompt shows up. Though of course, just as I was editing this video, another patch dropped with some news about the takedowns getting revamped, so don't be surprised if what I just said is outdated by next week. The obtuseness is amplified by the game's translation, or at least I assume it's a translation since the developers are French, and it has this awkward English to it, with quirks such as hit points being abbreviated to HPs rather than just HP like practically every other game. and that rust-damned inventory. There's no standalone inventory screen, and while you can check weapon stats between missions, you can't do it when you pick them up during missions. It boggles the mind how some parts of the game seem to have been designed as a looter-shooter, yet those looter-shooter elements seem kind of pointless, while everything else makes a clear difference. Upgrading your bionics is going to make a much bigger difference to your survivability than an extra 5 points of armor, which like many other things in the game is never explained in detail, and the +3 suit I have right now doesn't seem any better than the one I started with. It's also called light undersuit, hinting that there might be a heavy undersuit. But no, there are only light undersuits with slightly different stats. I'm sure the difference is there, but in practice I couldn't tell. A +3 weapon has higher base damage, but ultimately what really differentiates two weapons of the same type is the components equipped on it, and those are all easily replaceable with credits. And I really do love how tweakable each weapon is. Shotguns can be made to have minimal spread or all the spread, while assault rifles and submachine guns can go from bullet hoses to slow and precise headshot machines. But again, what's the point of randomized loot when you can just equip them with any of the components? Imagine if Borderlands let you replace your weapons' individual parts with any other in the game. Would defeat the game's entire purpose, wouldn't it? And speaking of defeating purposes, it's counterproductive to have so many enemies with hit-scan weapons when you get so many cool movement abilities, isn't it? It's not hard or anything. Even though enemies can burn through your shield and health quickly, you can easily recover them just as fast. But some descriptions claim you get a higher chance to dodge by just doing certain things. So, does dodging and wall running simply reduce an enemy's accuracy? Who knows? All I know is that I have to point at the bad guy and shoot the bad guy, which to be fair is just about all you need to know really. And the dog. Yes, you can pet the dog. But in gameplay I usually forget it even exists, only occasionally remembering it and then seeing it just pop into existence for a minute or two as it casually does whatever the hell it wants. And sometimes it kills enemies, which is nice. But by the end of the game you can one-man army the entire planet anyway, so why even bother? Either way, this video isn't strictly about Necromunda. It's not a full-fledged review or anything. Instead, it's about the ways in which the first-person shooter is evolving. First, it was smaller things like dodge moves and climbing ledges, but 2021 is the year of the hook. Necromunda has a hook, Ultrakill has a hook, Shadow Warrior 3 has a hook, Halo Infinite has a hook, even Battlefield of all things has a hook now. Doom Eternal was technically 2020, but the second DLC came out this year, so it sort of counts. And it's likely a huge influence today due to its success. Okay, so it's more like the age of the hook rather than a specific year, but my point is, I'm noticing certain trends with first-person shooters, and I love them. We've had boomer shooters coming in vogue recently. Some people say that these trends are just old school shooters being in vogue once more, but I don't think it's just that. Classics like Doom and Quake were fast, but the mechanics themselves were very simple. Movement is something that we take for granted, but also something that is sorely underappreciated, especially in first-person shooters. A lot of this can be attributed to design trends like linear levels with predetermined set pieces, and executives being afraid of drifting from the norm lest the CEO only gets to buy 4 Ferraris instead of 5. But thankfully it started changing around 2016, with the main catalysts likely being Doom 2016 and Titanfall 2. Even something as fundamental as health has changed over the years. It started with health pickups, and then there was regenerating health and a few cases with a mix of both. Today we are seeing health pickups not only making a comeback, but also seeing new ideas that require the player to act aggressively in order to heal. The most well-known example of this is probably Modern Doom, where staggered enemies could be torn to shreds and turned into a fountain of goodies. Ultrakill made it so that you had to literally shower yourself in the blood spilling from enemies. And now Necromunda comes with a simpler variation, where getting hit triggers the Auto Sanguine ability, which lasts for a few seconds and lets you heal by just damaging enemies. Many of these mechanics aren't new. Abilities such as dodge moves have existed in action games for a long time, but strangely enough, those ideas rarely made their way into FPS games until recently. I'm not saying that there weren't FPS games like this, and obviously it makes sense for the combat to be focused on shooting, and to be fair, third-person shooters had more luck in this department. But I feel that there has always been a missed opportunity for more elaborate abilities such as these. Being a hunk of meat stuck on the ground is a limitation when it comes to the options available to the player, and the level design has to be built around those limitations. For example, levels can't be too vertical if the player can't easily reach higher places, and enemies are in the way. Having more freedom in movement also recontextualizes each kind of weapon, because no longer are you forced to approach enemies from one angle. You can do things like jumping over enemies and dumping explosives on them, and there aren't many things more satisfying than hooking onto an enemy and then blasting them in the face with a shotgun. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know I love the simplicity of old school shooters, and I think there's a place and an audience for every side of the spectrum. The old school, the new school, even the linear cinematic modern military shooter. But I also want games with more complexity and depth, more mechanics and little tricks to discover. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I want more games like Necromunda. Just less clunky and unpolished, and even more awesome.